Joining us now is Josh Hammer, Senior Editor at Large of Newsweek. Josh, great to see you. US President Donald Trump has announced that Iran and Israel have agreed to a ceasefire. This is what Vice President JD Vance had to say a little earlier.
When I left the White House, I thought that we might be able to get it across the finish line before this broadcast, and it looks like the president has been able to do that. I mean, look, he's been working the phones constantly, frankly, before the 12-day war started, but certainly over the past 12 days. The president's been extremely clear about America's national objective here. It is to create a world where Iran cannot build a nuclear weapon.
Josh, this is incredible to get a result like this so quickly. Are you confident it's going to hold?
Well, first of all, before my confidence level, this is a remarkable achievement, regardless, by President Donald Trump. I mean, this is really incredible stuff. I mean, Gabriella, for as long as I have been following politics, covering politics, talking, writing about politics, the sword of Damocles of the Iranian nuclear program has been one of the foremost foreign policy debates, literally, of our era, going back 25, 30 years. The Iranians have been building a nuke for a very long time now. So to go in like this and to eliminate their nuclear program without a single American casualty of a soldier, sailor, Marine, infantryman, diplomat, or anyone there is astounding. I mean, it is yet another example, as if we needed it, of Donald Trump just thinking, talking, and acting like no other president has before. I mean, the man just marches to his own tune, he beats to his own drum, and he gets results. Now, whether the ceasefire will actually hold there, look, let's recall that we are dealing with the most deceitful regime on the face of the earth. That is what the current Iranian Ayatollah malacracy is. Now, having said that, they have been wounded like never before. They've been wounded literally like never before since they took over in 1979 in the coup of the Shah. And Trump has shown that he is willing and able to reach deep into the bowels of their country. By the way, not just President Trump, but also Israel and the IDF, the Mossad, this incredible intelligence from the U.S. and Israel combined there, just going target by target, systematically eliminating high-ranking scientists, military commanders, the crown jewel of the nuke programs. So they know, that is, the Iranians know, that if they do anything whatsoever wrong, then this is going to be an utter disaster for them, an utter disaster. So that is why it actually might hold. But having said that, Gabriella, to use the old Ronald Reagan formulation there, this very much is a trust but verify, with an emphasis on verify, because you still are dealing with very deceitful people, assuming that this regime holds on for power for, another week, 2 weeks, month, which is itself very much an open question, I would say.
Well, as you say that Iran has been severely wounded, and there's a lot of speculation around how Iran was going to respond to the strike. And in the last 12 hours, we have seen Iran respond. Iran launched missiles against an American military base in Qatar, but the Trump administration had been given warning about this. So more than a dozen missiles were intercepted by Qatari air defences, and thankfully there were no casualties, no one was injured. And let's just take a look at how Donald Trump responded. He said it was very weak. He thanked the Iranian regime for giving the US notice of the attack, and he wrote, Iran has officially responded to our obliteration of their nuclear facilities with a very weak response, which we expected and have very effectively countered. What do you make of Iran's response, and what does it show you?
Well, it's a joke. I mean, it's an absolute joke. And by the way, the Iranian regime put out a propaganda statement after this, after none of their missiles actually landed, none of them had a single casualty that I'm aware of there. They put out a pretty hilarious, actually, propaganda statement after this, saying that they had pulverized the American military base, Al Udeid Air Base there. I mean, this is a transparent face-saving measure. That is literally the entire purpose of this exercise, is to try to demonstrate to their own people, the Iranian people who have been so deeply oppressed and subjugated for the 46 years of hell that this regime has been in power there. This is a dying, wounded animal that is essentially just lashing out to try to survive. And one of their ways of trying to survive is to demonstrate that they will still stand for their people, whatever that means. I mean, we're talking here about a kleptocratic theocracy that has pilfered trillions of dollars over the decades away from investing in their actual people into funding various terrorist proxies like Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen there. So none of it holds up there, but this was a very clearly an attempt at a face-saving measure. They probably coordinated it, not just with the U.S., but also with Qatar. Qatar happens to be Iran's closest Sunni Arab ally. It's all kabuki theater, Gabriella. This is a pure symbolic stunt there. And it's a joke. And frankly, it's a joke. And it says nothing good about the Iranian regime. And frankly, Gabriella, also, I might add, total egg on the face of those primarily on the left, but even some voices on the right who have been overinflating the Iranian threat for years, if not decades now. A lot of people said that this would lead to World War III, that it would lead to mass American casualties. China and Russia, they said, they're going to jump in, and China and Russia, oh, how can we get into a nuclear war with China and Russia? Literally, none of this has happened. None of it. Correct. China and Russia did not lift a finger, here. So all of this ended according to what some of the more sober analysts predicted there. And frankly, the shrieks of hysteria from the World War III crowd, they owe a big explanation to their audiences, I would say.
Absolutely, absolutely. But there's plenty of conversation and speculation around regime change. Donald Trump has hinted at it. He posted on Truth Social, it's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change? MIGA. Josh, what are your thoughts about this post? Is the president being serious? Is he hinting at a potential organic uprising? As we know, JD Vance and others in the administration have made it clear that that's not the goal here. That's not what the US is trying to achieve.
Well, Gabrielle, as you and I are speaking, there is a rumor that, and I should clarify, it is only a rumor, but there is a rapidly circulating rumor that I'm starting to hear suggesting that Donald Trump might have given Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Israelis essentially carte blanche to take a shot at the Ayatollah prior to the ceasefire taking effect. We'll see. We'll see if that actually ends up being the case there. But I don't think that's what Trump is getting at in this Truth Social post. He's not getting at a forcible decapitation of the head of the snake, the Ayatollah, and the mullahs. I think he's talking here about a grassroots uprising to overthrow this horrific regime. Now, look, regime change, when it is imposed by Western elites and when it is done in nation-building fashion, a la Iraq, a la Afghanistan, we've seen how that works out. It does not work out typically good. It speaks, frankly, to the hubris and arrogance of Western elites there. But when it's done from the grassroots uprising level against a regime as horrific as this, and let's recall here, we're talking about Persia. Persia is an ancient civilization going back 2.5–3 millennia. It's a very cultured, educated society there. The Persian people, prior to this horrific regime taking over, were some of the greatest people in the world, frankly, according to scientific advancements. The game of chess, if I'm not mistaken, was actually invented in Persia. I mean, the Persian people have actually done a lot for the world there. So again, it's always a fraught exercise, but if the Persian people take matters into their own hands, I would say that the odds are good that the successor regime would be at least less bad, ideally affirmatively better than what we're currently dealing with there. That's not to say that Trump would impose it via the United States here. This is not Team America, world police marching in to impose kind of the Western, Enlightenment liberal, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison constitutional order. That's not what's happening here. We're talking here about lending rhetorical and moral support to the Iranian people if they do decide to try to take matters into their own hands.
Okay, well, look, just in the last 12 to 24 hours, Israel has bombed the entrance gate of Iran's notorious Evin prison, which holds political prisoners and dual nationals. What kind of message does this send? What are the consequences or likely consequences of this in Iran?
Well, this is a notorious prison. This is exactly the prison that the Iranian regime held their political opponents. I mean, the women who are out there protesting in the streets, refusing to wear the hijab, people like that. Those are exactly the kind of people who are held in this prison. So look, whether it's this, whether it's Israel bombing the Iranian state media facility, the organ of the regime, trying to reach the Iranian people there. I mean, Israel has clearly shown that they're not messing around there. But again, at least as of now, the mullahs by and large remain in power there. So they're stopping short of an attempt at a full-on regime change there. But they are, in this particular case, seeming to aid and abet the jailbreak of many people who've been wrongfully detained by one of the most despicable regimes on the face of the earth there. And I interpret that, Gabriella, as one of many ways to try to lend soft support to the Iranian people there, because the people, frankly, that are going to be escaping from this prison now that it has been bombed by the Israelis, the people that are escaping there are exactly the kind of people that, using things like Elon Musk's Starlink, and they'll start communicating there. Maybe they can get arms from a source too. These are exactly the kind of people that you would like to think, indeed you would perhaps even like to pray, that might be willing to ultimately put their lives on the line to try to decapitate this most evil of regimes.
Looking at Iran's options, rather, there has been reported the threat of sleeper cells. Border Protection reports that the threat of sleeper cells in the US has never been higher. Tom Homan spoke about this.
Well, look, you and I have talked about this many times. I said the last 4 years, my biggest concern was this open border was the biggest national security vulnerability this country's ever seen. So I pulled numbers this morning just from a CBP under Joe Biden. There was 1,272 nationals of Iran released in the country between OFO and the Border Patrol. And you compare that to the Trump administration, zero. Right, zero releases. And right now, because of President Trump's leadership, we have the most secure border in my lifetime, most secure border in the history of this nation. So we have a secure border. That was President Trump's big win on securing this nation. So we're not releasing people in this country. Special interest aliens aren't crossing that border undetected. But under Joe Biden, we had over 10 million people cross that border. But my biggest concern from day one, beyond the fentanyl, beyond the sex trafficking women and children, were the 2 million known gotaways. Over 2 million people crossed that border. We don't know who they are, where they came from.
Josh, how concerned are you about this?
Well, Tom Homan's exactly right. I mean, literally every word that he just said strikes me as emphatically correct. Gabrielle, we can actually go back quite a bit further. So after 9/11 happened in the early 2000s here in the United States, there was a thing called the 9/11 Commission, which is exactly what it sounds like. They had a lot of senators, diplomats, high-ranking officials formulate an extensive conclusion, a summary as to what happened and why it happened. And one of the most famous conclusions of the 9/11 Commission, which came out in 04, 05, around then, was they said that it is axiomatic, it is self-evident that terrorists cannot commit harm within the United States if they don't come into the United States in the first instance. 9/11, in fact, most of the hijackers who flew those planes into the Twin Towers, the Pentagon, and so forth there, they were actually here on expired visas. So, illegal immigration, a part of it are these gotaways that Tom Homan's talking about. A lot of it, though, are just expired visas. But all of the above contributes to a national security environment where we have no idea who is currently in the country there. We have no idea who is currently here. And Iran and Hezbollah and their various proxies have had sleeper cells going on for decades now. This is not a particularly new thing. Rather, the difference is that we just have less of an idea as to how many of them are here in the United States and where they are. It's not good. It's a very legitimate concern there. It's something that I've been thinking about for a very long time there. Having said that, Gabriella, the possible threat of that is not something certainly that can dissuade you or disincentivize you from taking affirmative action overseas that is manifestly in the national interest. So I've seen some people on social media saying that, the threat of sleeper cells is so great that the United States should never have done this to Fordo and Natanz, the Iranian nuclear facilities. I profoundly disagree with that. You have to do what is best in the national interest there and then trust that law enforcement, the FBI, CIA, and so forth will take care of what's happening here on the home front there. But nonetheless, it is very much a real concern, no doubt about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Some Democrats are furious that Donald Trump took out Iran's nuclear threat. AOC and others have called for Donald Trump to be impeached for launching the strike on Iran without congressional approval, which is just so embarrassing for them. But also, while many have been celebrating and thanking Donald Trump for having the courage to do this, others have been taken to the streets in cities around the world protesting Free Palestine and denouncing the bombing of Iran's nuclear sites. Are you surprised? What's your reaction to this kind of response?
Gabrielle, I think that probably a majority of Democrats are actually genuinely hoping for a nuclear-armed Iran. I genuinely believe to this day that Barack Obama and his entire administration actually wanted Iran to be nuclear. And I'll tell you exactly why they think this. It's straight out of the left-wing academy. I mean, it is pseudo-academic claptrap, the legs of which I could barely even attempt to think of on my own. But the going theory is essentially this. They think that in the Middle East, Israel and the non-Islamist Arab states, namely Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, and so forth there, the logic is that those states, Egypt, Jordan, are just too powerful. And because they're too powerful, that is why you have these other countries like Iran, Turkey, Assad in Syria back when he was there. The logic is that is why they're launching it. That's why they're latching out. So if you take that to its next step, then it would follow that you actually want Iran to get a nuclear weapon to check the nuclear power of the Israeli, Saudi, Emirati axis there. And therefore, these people say that they'll kind of just balance each other out and there'll be grand peace in the region I mean, it's absurd. It's risible. It's frankly kindergartner logic. It's the kind of thing that you would expect, a drunk 19-year-old university freshman who is high on his supply from some toxic combination of various narcotics to kind of come up with at 3 a.m. in the college dorm room. I mean, it's just low IQ, midwit stuff, for lack of a better explanation there. But I think they actually genuinely believe it. So that probably above all is why people like AOC are lashing out. This is obviously not an impeachable offense. It is nonsense. The commander-in-chief under Article 2 of the Constitution absolutely unequivocally has the inherent constitutional authority to launch in prophylactic defensive strikes like this to protect the American people against an imminent threat. There's no doubt about that in constitutional law here in the U.S. whatsoever there. But they're coming from a starting place where they genuinely actually do want Iran to get a nuclear weapon, which really says, frankly, a heck of a lot about their moral priorities, I would say.
Josh Hammer, Senior Editor-at-Large of Newsweek, thank you so much for making the time to speak to us on Power Hour. Really appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you.